I know of no scientific one other than chance alone. I mean, events like this happen every winter. Remember, I started this off by telling you that the spring population of red-winged blackbirds is 150 million. In the fall, after the breeding season, they're double that, 300 million. What's that mean? That means that 150 million die between fall and the following spring. And some of them die individually, accident, disease, old age, predation. They can be caught by a hawk or killed on a roost by a raccoon or something like that, or they could fly into somebody's picture window, or they could collide with one another, or in some cases they get actually poisoned by federal agencies. And that's something that, I mean, these blackbirds are protected by the 1918 Migratory Bird Treaty Act. But they're treated a little bit differently than, cardinals and goldfinches and things like that. They're, as of actually January 1st, 2011, you can actually shoot these if they're doing harm to your crops, or if they're causing a nuisance by, roosting in your yard or something like that. The USDA, that's the U.S. Department of Agriculture, issues depredation permits every year for farmers and other people and municipalities to kill blackbirds. And through poisoning and netting and shotguns and so on, they even use a kind of a chemical warfare on these blackbirds. They kill tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions every year. Nobody knows what the exact count is because you can't tell how many you actually kill. You just have to report a kind of a rounded off number. And this is all perfectly legal, and it's done under permit. Back in the 1970s, they had USDA had a particularly insidious way of dispersing these birds from roost. What they would wait until in a cold winter night, not below freezing, but just above freezing, when a hard rain was expected. They would fly over a large roost and spray the birds with something called turgitol. And what that was is essentially, it's not poisonous, it's just a soap, which acts as a surfactant, which breaks down the oils on bird plumage, and it causes birds to get wet. So when it rains, they actually get wet instead of the water just rolling off their backs. And so these birds, if it's 33 degrees, they're being rained on, they can't conserve heat, and their plumage is wetted by the stuff that's sprayed. Well, they die of hypothermia in a couple of hours. They got rid of millions of blackbirds that way. And I don't think they do that anymore, but that just shows you the lengths that people go to actually get rid of these. So the federal government response to this was that they sent the birds to the laboratory to determine whether there was some kind of actionable event. It wasn't legal. For instance, if the birds had been poisoned by something that could have poisoned other species, or if they had drank from some kind of water supply that had been poisoned, then state and government authority, federal authorities would have been very interested in that, try to find the origin of that. But as soon as they determined that it was due to natural circumstances, then nobody's really interested in doing anything more about it. Anyway, this is a good time to answer questions. So, back.
I have a question. You mentioned that they were flying above the tree certainly for a long period of time. So that's unusual behavior on their part?
That is unusual.
Did you all find out a reason why they had that unusual
No.
behavior?
It's one of the unknown things. Now, I will say, that none of the specimens were actually sent to the Smithsonian here, so nobody here actually saw any of these things. And the only evidence we have that they were flying around is are the recordings from the radar from Little Rock Air Force Base and the airport, FAA radar in Little Rock. But this does provide really good evidence of what was happening during the time that the birds were actually falling. Because people do, they recorded when the birds were falling. Then you can double check it on the radar to see what the birds were doing. But on the radar, there's this big plume, this kind of this blossoming of a big flock coming up into the air, staying stationary in the same place for quite a while, and then after 5 or 6 hours, it just kind of like disappears again. It's just like a puff of smoke coming up and then going back down.
Has similar radar evidence been found for some of the other bird kill instances that you talked about?
Most of the time, people don't check. There was a separate company that checked this radar because it's a company that, and I forgot what the name of the company is, but they provide kind of real-time, kind of advanced warning of the position of bird flocks in flight to the FAA and to pilots. So it's their business to track bird migrations like that, to warn airports and pilots about migrating flocks of birds that could potentially cause air collisions.
So the data might exist for those other sites, but it just
yeah, all of this radar stuff is archived now. I don't know what the laws or rules about archiving radar data, but I'm sure with the computer capacity that's available now that every bit of the stuff is archived someplace. So if you did want to, check these kinds of things out retroactively, you could.
It seems that you don't know why the birds were flying in the spiral pattern, which was unusual for them. And it's not just Arkansas and Kentucky. I think there was another one in Texas, and there were a few others, and I heard about some in Asia, and then there were the drumfish, and then there were, crabs in Great Britain or wherever it was. And some of these could very well be coincidence, but there seems to be a whole lot of stuff going on all at once. Is this kind of frequency normal, or is this indicative that something in the environment or even something man-made might be stirring things up?
I think it's more likely that people are actually paying attention. And after the first one, it was kind of weird, it got a lot of publicity, and then all of a sudden people say, my God, it's happened here too. I think what generally happens is that things like this happen at irregular intervals every winter, all around the world, in cold, temperate climates, that people just don't record them, and they don't see any pattern. It's like any kind of a statistical analysis. If you had some way of recording where all of these events happen, the magnitude of the event, how many birds died, you were able to piece this together, then you can look for causality. But what you have is just people that are paying attention. The first episode in Arkansas got so much publicity instantly that people started paying attention. Now that the interest in this is kind of trailing off, it's no longer on television every night. Probably be a dozen more episodes like this during the winter, especially if we have more episodes of freezing rain and bad weather across the South. So no, I don't think it's there's any evidence that it's anything but this chance awareness. I think things like this happen all the time. Just that people aren't always aware of things like this all the time.
Yeah, I think it was the fact that the media just ran with it. It was the fact that they picked up a story. It was probably a quiet day at the office or something.
Yeah.
They picked up something and it kind of scared everyone else. But like I'm from Australia, and in Western Australia, where I'm from, just a couple of hours south. A couple of years back, there was a couple of thousand birds all died within a couple of days. Like it wasn't in one night, but over about, I think it was over about 4 days or something like 3,000 or 4,000 birds just died. And it turned out that they'd all been drinking from the same water source, which had a mix of different metals that had been leaching out from a mine about 20 k's, so something like 15 miles away. And the problem was that none of the metals by themselves were killer. It was the fact that the combination, and it took them over 9 months to figure out that there was such a big mix of chemicals that it wasn't any one that they tested for. It was a combination of like 5 or 6, which kind of just like killed everything. They kind of killed off the tourism, because I study biological tourism. and it killed all tourism in that area because the entire tourism section is for birds, and you've just gone and lost about 5,000 birds straight away. It killed everything. But yeah, like I was thinking that, like when I heard about this happening over here, that could be one of the things. It's just it's a mix of like it's just a complex mix that no one's been able to link yet. But the fact that it's been so widespread is, I think, that media grabbing the control over it is making it huge, and the fact that some unexplained things that haven't been found yet.
Well, you know, for all the time that ornithologists spend studying birds, we actually know very little about why they do what they do. But we can't figure out why people do what they do either, so.